Tax the rich. You may have heard time and time again that wealth taxation and redistribution is socialism. I am here to tell you today that it is not. Everything I'm going to tell you is solely based on capitalism, free markets, and the ways by which you are exploited. I am not a socialist, Marxist, or a communist, and in fact, I am a classical liberal. I believe in the individual, private property ownership, and basically everything the founding fathers laid out in the Constitution. With all of that being said, it is clear to me that wealth inequality has grown vastly, and right now is the time for change. The system itself is broken. Whether you're watching this video to strengthen your arguments and debates with family or friends, or if you're watching to take away what the other side believes, it does not matter. You will take away arguments that will force you to contemplate and contend with your beliefs about wealth, inequality, inflation, redistribution, and America's current leadership like no other video has before. This manifesto about the wealthy elitists that run our society is broken up into 4 chapters. Chapter 1 is about current wealth inequality and how it compares to our past. Chapter 2 is about the current conditions that aid this crisis, the role of Trump's administration in all of this, and debunking counter-arguments. Chapter 3 is about the causes of modern wealth inequality and my theory on industrialization and perfect competition and why wealth inequality is bad. Chapter 4 is the solution, along with debunking counter-arguments to my solution. With that being said, I'm Charles Pellin, host of the Pellin YouTube channel. Sit back, relax, get some raw milk and Monster Energy. This new flavor is pretty good. Play some video games. Just leave this video on in the background as we now take a look at how modern wealth inequality shapes America. As always, thank you for watching. Sources can be found in the description. It is no surprise to anybody that wealth inequality has been getting worse in modern America, so I'll keep this part brief. I can only liken the immense wealth inequality Americans feel today to that of the Gilded Age. It was a time of crazy wealth inequality, oligopolistic corporations running everything, and immense social unrest. It is my belief that we are now in a second Gilded Age. I say this because the only group in America who's been able to enjoy the spoils of modern advancement over the last 40 years has been the wealthiest of Americans and the Americans who earn the most income. While both wealth inequality and income inequality have been getting worse over time, wealth and income inequality are both two different things that need to be tackled differently. Wealth is the total sum of all your assets minus the debts that you owe. And income is usually the amount of money that you take home from work, typically calculated yearly. In both regards, inequality has been rising over time. While real incomes have risen over this time period, by just focusing on income alone, it is clear to see the divide growing. Since 1979, the bottom 90% of Americans have only seen their incomes grow by 44%, whereas the top 1% of wage earners have seen their wages skyrocket by 182%. This is only wages, the real income that somebody earns. This, of course, is not accounting for assets that people have. If we look at assets alone, it becomes even worse. The top 10% of Americans hold more wealth than the bottom 90%, according to the Federal Reserve. By wealth breakdown, the top 0.1% of Americans hold $23 trillion in wealth. The 99 to 99.99% holds $29 trillion in wealth. The next 90 to 99% holds $64 trillion in wealth. Following this, the bottom 50 to 90% in America only holds $59 trillion in wealth, and the bottom 50% only holds $10 trillion. Aside from the fact that wealth inequality from the bottom 50% to the top 50% is already super bad, if we just look at the bottom 90% to the top 10%, it's still super bad. This means that odds are you don't own shit. Your wealth that you've accumulated throughout your life is basically nothing compared to the top 10% that lives in the Hollywood Hills. And of course, it's not as if though it's been getting better. While wealth has grown since 1990, the percentage share of who holds that wealth has been getting worse. The bottom 90%'s wealth in 1990 was 39% as a share of all wealth, whereas in the year of our Lord 2025, it has shifted to the bottom 90% only holding 33% of all wealth. You may say that this doesn't matter A 6% decrease is basically nothing. This 6% decrease is trillions of dollars. Trillions. Since 1975, $79 trillion has been taken from the bottom 99% to the top 1%. While 1975 and 1990 are two different years, it still goes to show that wealth inequality has been increasing and your wealth has been stolen from you. I'm sure that if you're up to date about wealth inequality, you already knew all of this. Odds are, if you're the average American, you already knew all of this. Let's take a look at some data that you might not have known until now. The top 10% of Americans now account for 50% of all consumer spending in America. Half of all consumption comes from the top 10% of Americans. You might wonder, why has everything gotten so expensive as of late? Everything is so expensive because companies are no longer making goods and services for you anymore. They are making them for the top 10% of Americans whose income dwarfs yours and they are able to afford luxury goods or increased prices. Companies are doing this because half of all consumer spending comes from the top 10%. 70% of our economy is consumer spending. They account for half of that. The data is clear and conclusive. There is no wealth for you to have. Your wealth is actively being transferred to the top 10% of Americans in this country. You will be forced to live in a world where you effectively don't own anything, and I'm sorry to break it to you, but that world is today. Wealth inequality and income inequality itself is a market failure. What happens when people are unable to afford goods and services is that goods and services are not purchased. This leads to the entire market collapsing and us entering a recession. In fact, it is in the best interest of the wealthy to support these policies that I will introduce at the end of the video, because it leads to the market succeeding and will further make society better, which keeps them wealthier. If all of that was not enough for you, here are like 15 different metrics by which the poor are getting poorer, by the way. It's not just that the rich are getting richer. As they are getting richer, they are also taking from the bottom. With this broad data being given to you about wealth inequality over time, let's go to chapter 2 of my manifesto. You thought the broad wealth inequality data was bad. It's actually even worse. As of today, your life keeps getting worse. The current administration is aiding in that fact as well. You likely have already felt the effects of Trump's economic policy. Here is the current data that we have. Youth unemployment for people fresh out of school is now higher than regular unemployment. This happens while regular unemployment also continues to rise to a level that we have not seen in 4 years. In fact, I want to take you back to July 2025, a time of peace, fireworks, cold beers, and more importantly, America. That being America's new jobs report. It was so bleak that not only did it report little new jobs created, but they actually had to revise down June and May's numbers by 250,000 jobs. 250,000 jobs. Production has got to be running short to see that type of economic forecast being reduced. In fact, the lady who made that jobs report was fired by Trump and replaced by an ally to his agenda. The most recent August jobs report is even worse, as it estimated that the economy added nearly 1 million fewer jobs than anticipated last year. So what's the cause of this rising unemployment nightmare? Our economic slowdown can be put on a few things, the biggest being Trump's tariffs. I have a much longer video on the card above about Trump's tariffs if you're curious, but in short, American producers and consumers pay for the tariff. American producers usually need to buy goods from other countries in order to make more domestic goods and services here. If they are taxed on importing those goods, they need to create new goods. That leads to them producing less and employing less people, which of course leads to prices rising. This is why inflation is steadily on the rise again, and the American manufacturing sector has lost 42,000 jobs since April. Tariffs are not going to help the US economy. They are in fact going to hinder it. All of this has led to the Federal Reserve cutting the interest rate. They cut it from 4.25% to 4%. This, of course, is to help the slowdown of our economy. If unemployment is high, they typically lower the interest rate. When they lower the interest rate, this is supposed to motivate businesses to take out loans in order to expand production or hire new people, leading to unemployment declining. So does this mean that the crisis is averted? No way, it's actually worse than that. This normally would work if we lived in regular times. However, In our current time, inflation is now on the rise again. You are getting double screwed, in fact. You can't land a job, and the stuff you buy is also more expensive. The consumer price index continues to climb. Why is this? Well, besides tariffs, Trump's Big Beautiful Bill also contributes to this conundrum. The Big Beautiful Bill, while cutting money for programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, still somehow has found a way to add $3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. This is largely because all of the policies in the bill benefit the wealthy. Trump also increased national defense spending with this bill as well. Shout out to my economics professor, Justin Wolfers, for making this amazing graphic detailing the situation. Normally, deflation and unemployment go hand in hand, and inflation and low unemployment go hand in hand as well. The problem is that, as Americans, we are experiencing two awful issues at the exact same time. Unemployment is rising, and so is inflation. There is usually no clear-cut remedy when you have two economic policies that are contradicting each other. There, in fact, is no remedy for this because the Federal Reserve is sitting there trying to balance the two forces that are at hand, whereas Trump's administration is only making both of them worse. All of this isn't even touching our current housing market either. The average home buying age continues to climb, with the median age being 40 years old. It's actually even worse because baby boomers bought more homes than millennials and Generation X, at 42% compared to millennials' 29%, and Generation X's 24%. I'm sorry, but you have to be smoking crack if you think right now is the best time for consumers in America. It just seems to be, by every metric, we are getting worse as time has progressed. I'd also like to mention that in the second quarter of 2025, our economy has grown apparently by 3%. Congratulations, Trump, your policy is doing some good, it looks like, except that's not actually the case. The only reason the economy grew was because we imported less goods and services from other countries. Our country's gross domestic product is calculated by adding consumer spending, government spending, investment spending, and net exports. Notice I said net exports. That is exports minus imports. If we import less, that means our GDP will rise because we have more in net exports. But that doesn't mean anything actually changed with our domestic economy much. I'd also like to cover the AI bubble right now as well. While AI could prove to be the most profitable invention in all of human history, it is clear to me that the entire evaluation of AI has been based on future expectations, not what actually is happening right now. OpenAI has made over $1 trillion in AI deals, but has only made around $13 billion in revenue. The largest issue is that AI has literally ran out of data to train their models on, so progress is likely to plateau from here. 60% of our stock market growth has been surrounded by AI companies, while everything else is either in the dumpster or just kind of lagging along. If in fact this is a bubble, which I think it is, what happens to your retirement if this bubble were to burst? What if AI growth does indeed plateau and is no longer a profitable investment? All of the retirement funds are betting your money on AI. So not only if the AI bubble bursts, you're going to lose all your money, but they will likely get bailed out. Not to mention the fact that if the AI stocks were to be proven right and AI succeeds, that probably means that you're out of a job, which seems like it's a net loss for everybody, no matter the outcome. All of this, and I haven't even covered what's going on with farmers right now in America. Farmers, especially soybean farmers in America, are getting royally screwed over. Due to Trump's tariffs, farmers have been shut out of the Chinese market for agriculture, which was our largest market for agriculture prior. Soybean farmers are now unable to sell to the Chinese market because of China's retaliatory tariffs. China has started to buy soybeans from Argentina, which is a country that Trump just bailed out. Trump is literally taking money from our farmers and giving it to their competitors and then punching our farmers in the face. I hope that all of this data I've presented paints the picture for you that our economy and our future is completely dead. Speaking of death, if you don't want to end up like one of these tombstones behind me, remember to subscribe, hit like, hype it up, and share it with your friends. Leave a comment too if you're so inclined. Do you disagree with what I have to say in this video? If so, firstly, I have a plot dug out behind me just for you. Secondly, join my Discord and debate and discuss the ideas with me. If you do like what I have to say in this video, join my Discord to get new updates on new content and discuss current events, politics, economics with everybody else in the server. Follow my Instagram for short clips and exclusive content from videos like this. Thank you for watching and happy Halloween. With this conclusive current data, we also need to spend some time addressing popular counter arguments to what I have to say. Hopefully you can use these to brush up on your arguments with family and friends who are going to give you some pushback. First counterargument. Aren't we living in the best time ever? Doesn't the average person today enjoy the splendors of technology and advancement like no other in the past? Aren't we wealthier today than we ever have been in the past? Everything that this counter-argument lays out is factually true when you look at macroeconomic data. We are wealthier than ever, we have the best technology ever, and we are the most advanced society ever. This, however, does not apply to everything within our market. On many metrics, we have only gotten worse, especially when it comes to things like housing. We are doing terribly. In fact, I kind of agree with this argument so much that I would actually even say the average homeless man might live better than a king hundreds of years ago, but that functionally does not matter. Wealth and the problems of inequality associated with it are about the right now. It is pragmatically useless to compare a collective wealth right now to the wealth of our society in the past, as it doesn't address the real problems that Americans are facing right now. It is far more useful to look at the poor and compare them to the rich than compare everyone right now to everyone 100 years ago. Less than 60 years ago, many Americans were starving. Basically, nobody starves in America today. That doesn't mean policies like food stamps still aren't useful, though. It's nice to believe that we live in the best time ever, but when the most you can afford as a luxury good is 2 taquitos and a Slurpee from 7-Eleven, it doesn't seem like that really matters. Second counterargument. Wealth inequality is natural, therefore good. It is supposed to exist because some people are naturally better at certain skills. For example, LeBron James is fantastic at basketball, Ben Shapiro is good at politics, and Blade is the best musician to ever grace the face of the earth. Their wealth makes sense because they excel, therefore they deserve it. I'll keep it brief because this is covered later on in the video, but I actually can agree with this to some extent. Large wealth accumulation is not natural, which I will explain in the next chapter of this manifesto, but some having more than others is of course natural within a meritocracy. Some people are just better at things than other people, which leads to their skills being more valuable compared to others within the free market. This, of course, does not explain why wealth inequality continues to skew towards the top. It also does not follow that somebody owning more than somebody else is a good thing by its very nature. To some extent, it can be good to encourage innovation with the promise of profit, but this skew to where the poor cannot afford things and their needs are not met does not make sense at all, in my opinion. Ultra wealth also does not follow because your wealth is largely predicted by the wealth of your parents, not actually your merit alone. This is because the wealth of your parents can contribute to you succeeding as a child, which leads to you having better outcomes as an adult. For example, a rich kid might have access to tutors, the best schools, the best books, the best everything, to where they are able to succeed much better than a regular person can. A poor American might have to work twice as hard just to be regular on the economic indexes. All of this also comes about when the government does not do their job to regulate the free market and enforce antitrust laws. I can continue to explain this, but once again, when you can hardly afford a McDonald's $5 meal deal, does it really matter to you if somebody's naturally better at a certain skill than you are? Our current economic condition is not Trump's fault. Instead, he is actually fixing it. The Democrats and Joe Biden ruined the economy during the pandemic, and we are only going downhill from here because of that. This argument shows a lack of understanding for why Joe Biden had to deficit spend. We were in an environment where a pandemic likely could have caused a recession. Joe Biden and the Democrats had to deficit spend in order to pull us out of that recession. You have to stimulate the economy in order to prevent recessions. After it was over, the inflation rate continued to go down for all of Biden's term. For this reason and many others, Joe Biden is like an S-tier president in my playbook, and he's probably in my top 5. And by comparison, Trump's deficit spending was way worse because he deficit spent when we didn't need to deficit spend. Our economy was doing really good, largely because of Obama's administration, right before Trump got into office. If the economy is running hot and doing really well, you should be bringing back budget surpluses, not deficit spending. Even during his first term, when the economy was amazing, he cut taxes for the ultra wealthy for basically no reason, just to deficit spend and to help his inside group. If you want to learn more about why I hate Donald Trump, you can check out my January 6th manifesto in my video about his tariffs, both linked in the card above. Well, there are more arguments to address. I will cover those at the end of chapter 4. But with that being said, it's time we go to chapter 3, the causes of modern wealth inequality. This is my personal economic theory, and if I ever have to write a master's thesis or something, I will be writing it about this. We need to take a look at monopolies and oligopolies. This is what my first YouTube video was about, in fact, as it is one of the causes of wealth inequality in America. First, we must explain what perfect competition is. Perfect competition is a market structure where every supplier within the market produces the exact same good, and there are a ton of suppliers. This leads to firms that compete in this market structure to be price takers. Since if you were to charge above the market price, you as a consumer would just buy the same good from somewhere else. Examples of this type of market structure include agriculture, farmers markets, and foreign currency exchanges. This is also similar to monopolistic competition, where yes, there are hundreds of suppliers, there are still differences in the types of products that they create. There are also price takers once again, because if you were to charge a price higher compared to another, they likely would check out your competitor and buy their good instead. Examples of monopolistic competition include restaurants, television services like Netflix, Disney Plus, and HBO, and clothing companies. Throughout almost all of human history, markets have competed in these two types of structures, where there were hundreds of sellers who all sold goods that were basically the same or incredibly similar. Almost all firms operated in either perfect competition or monopolistic competition. The amount of goods that one could buy was limited, and they were supplied by many different sellers. Crops, vases, foods, ironworks were all basically the exact same, besides small artistic differences between products. For example, one vase might have a very intricate design to where you're willing to pay more for it. The only real, substantial, kingly wealth was made through force and aristocracy. Kings took your money through taxation, and they didn't give it back to you in any meaningful way. While rich individuals did exist, nobody was ultra wealthy through goods and services alone. They were only rich through force. However, the market structure completely shifted upon industrialization and patent law. These factors led our market to shift to a market structure that is more in line with today, where monopolies and oligopolies basically control everything. First, industrialization leads to an increased cost to entering any market compared to a regular market structure. While it is true that industrialization reduces marginal cost, aka the cost to produce one more good or service, industrialization also increases the fixed cost. You cannot compete in a free market while having higher marginal cost compared to somebody else, because they will outcompete you. If you both make the same good, they will undercut you and you will be out of business. In order to mass produce goods and optimize your marginal cost, you need things like factories, tractors, all of these things that have immense cost associated with them. This leads to fewer people entering the market, further reducing competition. This, of course, is the end state of capitalism, regardless of industrialization. The people with the lowest costs always win, because they can outcompete their competitors within the free market. Industrialization also speeds this up, because those with capital are able to accrue more capital to outcompete everybody else. This further leads to wealth being consolidated towards the top. Patent laws also further this problem. Patent laws are designed to create monopolies. You literally create something and you get a patent saying only you can make it. As innovation continues, as it has at record rates in modern America, this leads to more and more patents being filed, further monopolizing capital. This further leads to wealth being skewed towards the top, and it helps explain why your wealth is being stolen. Of course, the government also plays a part in this entire process as well. The government also stopped caring about antitrust laws, evidently, which is why there are basically only two soda companies, Pepsi and Coke. Even with other companies, as shown in this image if you'd like to pause, it's clear as day that the goods and services that we consume are being consolidated into the hands of fewer and fewer people. This brings me to chapter 4, where I discuss what we can do about it. I believe that the correct way to fix the problems that we have is to tax wealth and income and redistribute it. No, I am not a socialist, Marxist, communist, or anything like that. I am a filthy, greedy capitalist. My policies are capitalistic in nature because they are a correction of the unnatural state of competition we currently live in. I do need to preface before I continue that just because an outcome is economically efficient, that does not mean that we should pursue it as a society. It would be efficient for a company to pollute the environment in order to ramp up production, but that doesn't mean that is what we want as a society. In a similar vein, we also don't want the price of insulin to be high because of course we want people to be able to live. In this chapter, I am also going to debunk ideas about welfare, minimum wage, and UBI, and explain why they all actually are good policies. First, I support an unrealized capital gains tax. The biggest issue with wealth accumulation is that wealth builds on top of wealth. An unrealized capital gains tax helps remedy this issue, and of course is one of the policies that Kamala Harris supported during her presidential run. We can also implement this policy on asset owners above a certain threshold. Like for example, let's just say 100 million worth of assets. That way it doesn't affect people whose wealth is not substantial. I'd also like to see this tax apply to things like hedge funds as well, but maybe not as high as 25%. I just think we need something in this regard. The next policy I support is a higher marginal income tax to combat wealth inequality. I want the highest tax brackets to be taxed even more, essentially. No, this is not immoral, and this is not unfair. Everyone is judged by the same amount of income tax. It just changes depending on your income. So if I were to accumulate more income, I would be taxed higher. We need this type of progressive income tax structure to further combat income inequality in America. While not part of this video directly, I also support a land value tax. Further supports the efficient use of land, either furthering satisfaction or production, making society better off in the long run. And for those of you who don't know, a land value tax is basically where you tax somebody per acre of land that they own. So it could be $100 per acre or something like that. This could collect billions of dollars in tax revenue. Further, we also need to increase the IRS budget, which can sound like a dystopian nightmare to some, but for every dollar increase in the IRS spending when it comes to auditing the wealthiest of Americans, we can expect anywhere from $4 to $6 as a return on investment. That is an incredible rate. So it seems like a policy that we really should be supporting. So another policy I support is increasing the IRS budget to go after the wealthiest of Americans. Further, I'm a little bit neutral on corporate tax rates. If a Democrat were to come into office and say, I'm going to increase the corporate tax rate, I wouldn't really care. There is some evidence to suggest that when it comes to things like the Laffer curve, we are on the right-hand side of it when it comes to corporate tax rates, but we're on the left-hand side when it comes to basically everything else. For those who don't know, the Laffer curve is an idea where you continue to collect tax revenue only up until a certain point, at which point the more you increase taxes, the less revenue you will collect. For most things in our economy, like income for example, we should be increasing the tax rate because we're on the left side of it, but for things like corporate taxes, we may be exactly where we want to be. The ideal range is estimated to be around 20 to 30% depending on what source you choose, and America has a 21% corporate tax rate, and also most US states have corporate tax rates ranging from 3 to 6%, so we probably are in the ideal spot when it comes to corporate taxes. But it's also important to note that the Laffer curve isn't the end-all be-all, and it basically was the economics behind trickle-down economics, and we all kind of understood how well that went. Just recognize that it can be a tool in your toolbox when debating, but don't make it the entire center point of an argument. But there are some benefits to increasing the corporate tax rate, as it incentivizes companies to invest within their company, which further increases production, which would lead to higher employment and likely higher salaries for people who are working. And they do all of this because them investing within their company is a tax write-off. I do also see the other perspective, so I'm a little bit neutral on this. So most European countries, they have something called a value-added tax. Basically, whenever you add value to a good or service, you get taxed on that. It's kind of similar to our sales tax. So if I were to turn seeds into wheat, that would be an example of me adding value to a good, leading to me getting taxed on that. Now, if somebody else were to take that wheat and make it into bread, that would be an example of them adding value to that good or service, which would also get taxed. So that is also a policy I support even more, especially in comparison to things like sales tax. I think what we have to do in large part is just direct our tax policies to target the top Americans. That's basically how we save the country from just complete disastrous freefall. And then this money that we get from these taxes needs to be put towards free healthcare, UBI, things like food stamps, honestly, any welfare program, and free college education. Governments are more efficient at providing health insurance when compared to for-profit companies. These for-profit insurance companies like to make our lives worse, deny us care, increase costs, and lobby the government. Compared to every other country when it comes to healthcare, we spend the most. Even when it comes to the public sector, we spend more compared to them because these for-profit insurance companies get in the way between proper healthcare and government regulation. Not to mention the fact that we spend additional lump sums when it comes to private care as well. It is my belief that we need to switch to a system that they have, as it will not only save us money, but it will make our country better. And no, having the government provide healthcare insurance is not the same as the government running healthcare. The government running it would not be efficient because it would make society even worse because there would be zero competition within the healthcare market, so it couldn't respond to price indicators. But the government providing health insurance still incentivizes companies to compete with each other just for a single payer. That single payer being the government. Universal basic income is also a great solution. This data is also clear-cut as well. Giving people free money, rent assistance, food stamps, etc. does not lead to a significant reduction in hours worked. One study found that by giving people $1,000 per month, it only reduced their working hours by 1 to 2 per week on average. So effectively, by the government spending $12,000 per year, they only lost around $1,800. That is effectively no change at all in employment. Many people also claim that welfare creates welfare queens, or it just leads to people being lazy. That is also simply not true. There are, of course, other socioeconomic reasons for why people continue to work even when they're given assistance. Some people choose to go back to school, which further increases their income as well. Money transfers seem to be one of the best policies when it comes to increasing health, education, and local community. These policies are highly successful. For example, in Alaska, it is important to also implement UBI correctly. UBI cannot be based on income because that's the greatest flaw with it. This is what incentivizes workers to be lazy because there is no point in working if your income is going to decrease if you were to earn more money. If UBI was universal for everybody instead, this would let us fix our problems with wealth inequality and income inequality in general. Because people are still incentivized to move up the social ladder, this is because people do not lose their UBI as they increase in income in my perfect world. Because why would you work if you would lose money by working? Instead, you need to keep that money even if you do decide to work. Finally, a minimum wage is actually a good thing. The correlation between an increase in the minimum wage and a decrease in employment is incredibly small, or it might even be positive. This is largely because the demand curve for labor is inelastic. People will typically always demand labor to produce new goods or services. This is why data from census.gov tells us that if we were to increase the minimum wage to $17 an hour, it would directly boost the income of 10 million Americans when implemented in accordance to a proposed law in 2023. It would further have a spillover effect on 11 million other Americans, further increasing their income as well. And on average, this policy would only see 900,000 jobs lost. So we benefit 21 million people at the cost of 900,000 jobs. It honestly seems like a pretty good trade-off to me. This is largely because the average wage for Americans is far higher than $17 an hour. In fact, right now it's about $28 an hour. This is because a minimum wage increase can be good when it is not binding. It instead protects low-wage earners and increases their take-home pay, while having functionally no effect on the rest of society in general. It doesn't even cause inflation either. Everything that you've been told about the minimum wage has been a complete lie, by the way. With the minimum wage being increased to $15 an hour, we would likely only see a 0.1% increase in inflation. So functionally no change at all, and only 500,000 jobs lost at $15 an hour. This is not up for question like whatsoever. The actual efficiency of implementing a minimum wage is a prudent deal that we need to take. This minimum wage that we currently have, when compared to that of other European countries, is incredibly low. Ours is only around 30% of our average wage, whereas theirs range from 50 to 60%. On almost every metric, these European countries are more prosperous than us when it comes to healthcare, education, minimum wage, UBI, basically every social welfare program that we need to implement right now. We also need to implement laws to prevent people from using their assets as collateral when they need to take out loans. So technically, they don't make any income when they do this. And we also need to strengthen antitrust laws to prevent monopolization within our markets. It is deeply true that the strength of capitalism is its ability to use competition to solve the problem of scarcity. This is why we need competition within our market, because a lack of competition competition is fundamentally a market failure. It is a subversion of what makes private property ownership so good in the first place. The actual ideas behind what I'm talking about are in line with free markets and capitalism. The idea of UBI has been around since Thomas Paine. We all typically agree that it is not immoral for the government to tax people when they provide us with goods and services that make society better off as a whole. For example, we need taxes to build roads. We need these roads to ensure that capitalism can take place, in fact, because if you don't have roads, how will people go from one place to another to engage in the trade of goods and services? Roads allow them to do that, and it makes it far easier than if there were no roads. With all of this being said, now it is time to address counter-arguments. Counter-argument number one. Won't these policies create inflation? Since the government is spending more money, that will lead to inflation being created. No, it does not increase inflation. We are taking money either from income or wealth to fund these policies within America. So it's not just our government printing money and spending it. We are taking money from one part of the economy and moving it towards another part of the economy. This does not create inflation because aggregate demand remains unchanged, since we effectively just shift where on the income level that aggregate demand goes to. This could actually create new markets because the needs of the poor will be met far better, as they will have more income to buy more goods and services. Counter argument number two. It seems immoral to tax income. Why should we do it? Who gets to say that the money I earned should be taken? That seems messed up, yo. I have a few different critiques for this worldview. First, I do believe that it is moral to tax people. While I believe in liberalism, I also recognize that I am a left-wing liberal, with liberalism being defined as the general ideas of John Locke and the Founding Fathers. To exemplify this, I will highlight something about estate taxes. When you die, a right-wing liberal might say that your estate shouldn't be taxed and that you should be able to do with it what you wish, like passing it off to your children. I don't believe this, actually. I think that for the ultra-wealthy, it should be taxed. This is because while I do see the importance of passing your wealth off to your kids, I also recognize that the kid did not earn that money himself. It instead was passed on to them, not based on their merits as a person.
I'm aware that this sounds hypocritical, but here's the general idea. Taxing death is moral because the individual did not earn that money. So instead, we should take some of that money and put it into a system of welfare to ensure that we actually live in a meritocracy. This leads to everyone being fairly judged and not having to deal with the struggles associated with income inequality.
I think that people should be judged as individuals and treated as such, which is why I believe in welfare to begin with. How can you maximize your potential as an individual when you are worried about your next meal or the roof over your head? It is incredibly hard to maximize that potential because there's other factors that are hindering your ability to succeed. Further, we also need to recognize the diminishing marginal value of money. After a certain point, the more and more money that you have does not lead to greater satisfaction within your life. Let's say you had $10 million sitting in the bank. If I were to give you another $1,000, it wouldn't really be that useful. However, if you had no money in the bank, that $1,000 that I would give you would be incredibly useful. This is because the more and more of a good that you consume, the less useful it becomes. And in fact, money is a good like all other goods. Money becomes less and less useful the more and more that you have. There is functionally no change in the quality of your life from 50 million to 100 million. This is the concept of diminishing marginal utility. What if instead we took that $1,000 from the rich man who is not putting it to use and instead gave it to a poor person who will put that money to work? This leads to our societal benefit being much larger than it would be regularly. It is also incredibly true that your lot in life is largely dictated by your parents' incomes, with those two factors being correlated immeasurably. It seems completely unfair to not try to maximize the utility that everybody has, regardless of what class they are born into. Everybody should be given a fair shake at life. Counter number 3. Doesn't welfare create welfare queens? AKA those who just leech off of welfare and contribute nothing to society. This is only partially true. This is only true when welfare is based on income. Why would you try to increase your lot in life if you receive less money by doing so? If instead, welfare were to remain unchanged, whether or not you increase or decrease your income, This eliminates that problem, as I discussed with the data prior. While there are more counter-arguments that need to be addressed, I would appreciate it if you could leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section of this video, and hopefully I'll tackle them someday in the future. If you really want to have a deep discussion with me about this topic, join my Discord below and we can get to talking about that.
Future Charles here. I'd like to add an argument from the Thomas Sowell types as a counter-argument. They would typically say that poverty and inequality is simply a problem with age, that your lifetime income is going to increase as you are likely to be the poorest when you are in school. My response to that is just look at the data about your poverty being linked to your parents' poverty. This completely debunks this notion.
With that being said, it's time to go to the last chapter of this manifesto, the conclusion. We need to eliminate the problems of wealth inequality within this country. It is by far the most pressing issue that we face as a society. You need to advocate for policies like an increase in the minimum wage, taxing the rich, welfare, free healthcare, UBI, free education, and all things related to that. No, you are not a communist for believing in this. We need to make a society that is better for everybody, regardless of what income you were born into and regardless of what societal class you find yourself within. Policies like this are the only way we can achieve those goals. If you support this message and you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, subscribe, like, and do all that shebang. Share with your friends and family to try to change their minds or influence what they think, and join my Discord below if you like discussing politics. Check out my Instagram for more short form content. Thank you. I'll see you in the next one. Pellin out.